Hi, welcome to the SDP. As I'm filming this, we are only a month away from the games of the 30th Olympiad in London. I'm a huge fan of the Olympic Games, as with any sporting event that lets the world play together. But nobody's perfect. The 1980s were a tumultuous decade for the Summer Olympic Games. In 1980, the 22nd Olympiad in Moscow suffered a boycott of nations led by the United States due to the USSR invading Afghanistan the year before. Other NATO allies competed under a generic Olympic flag, but the medal count was dominated by Eastern Bloc athletes. As a result of the first boycott, the following Summer Olympics, held in Los Angeles, were in turn boycotted by the Soviet Union and its allies. But by 1988, the two sides kissed and made up in time for the Olympics in Seoul, South Korea, which was conveniently the last time the Soviet flag would be flown at the Games. Epic win. The reason I'm bringing up the Olympics is because the Japanese version of this game, Konami Sports in Seoul, was an unofficial tie-in to the Seoul Olympiad, hence the title. Konami released it in Japan in September 1988, the day before the Olympics started, but it didn't show up in America until '89. As such, to tie it into the popular arcade and home game they released before, the game was renamed Track and Field 2, and it's the subject of today's review. There are 12 events in this game, plus 3 extra exhibition events. 3 others are recycled from the NES version of Track and Field, but overall there is plenty of variety. Each event has a different control scheme, and only 6 of those involve mashing buttons. But for those that do, this game can be hard. Allow me to demonstrate. As you can see, the speed or power meter that you build up by mashing A drains pretty quickly. If you're just casually tapping it with the thumb or finger alone, you'd have to be skilled at that just to keep it half filled. This type of gameplay has led people to develop their own methods of hitting the button as rapidly as possible. For example, Kevin, what do you use for button mashing? Well, there's the obvious, using a turbo controller like the NES Advantage. But barring that, I like to put a sock over my hand and use the layer of cloth to rub across the button. Good thing, too. I hear they're enacting new anti-turbo rules. Let's check out the events. Kevin? Fencing. A simple versus fighter game. The first player to land 5 hits on the other wins. It's not a very polished game, as was nearly every fighting game before the first Street Fighter 2. The easiest way to win is to always aim low, but skill isn't as important as luck. Triple jump. You mash A to build up speed, and when you get up to the foul line, press and hold B to jump. Since this is the first sport that involves button mashing, this was a major roadblock for me, and we're only 2 out of 12 sports in. This sport returns from the original Track and Field, and I imagine not much has changed. Freestyle swimming. This is another button masher, but this time you have to deal with 2 buttons instead of 1. A builds up speed while B builds up oxygen. If your oxygen meter depletes, you'll stop for a moment to breathe automatically, which kills your chances of making the qualifying time. High dive. To start out, you select the type of dive you want to take, but there's really no difference I know of. Then, while you're in the air, you perform tucks and pikes by pressing B with left or right pressed. Ideally, you're supposed to stop just before the water in order to get the best angle, but the truth is I have not found any consistent way to get high grades. I would even go so far as to call the judging completely random. At least you have 4 attempts to be lucky enough to get a qualifying score. Clay pigeon shooting. There was a similar event in the first Track and Field, but it's much more straightforward this time around. Press B to manually launch your targets, the control pad to move the cursor, and A to fire. It's pretty fun, but drags on for a while. Hammer throw. Here's an interesting twist. Instead of mashing a button to build up power, you rotate or hit directions on the control pad clockwise to swing the hammer around. Then, once your athlete starts flashing, hold and release A to throw it. Unlike in triple jump, you have to hold A for a while before the angle starts going up, and if your timing's off, it may not respond at all. Taekwondo. Another fighting game, except this is possibly even more broken than fencing. The A button punches and B kicks, and you have to whittle down your opponent's stamina bar before he does the same to you. The problem is, every so often you or your opponent might collapse from a hit. It's not like in Punch-Out where you have to mash buttons to get back up. As long as your life isn't 0, you'll always get back up, so it's nothing more than a waste of time. Plus there's also the possibility of a one-hit knockdown. Besides, the punches are pretty much useless. It's way more effective to just spam roundhouse kicks. Pole vault. Similar to the triple jump. You start out by selecting your starting height, and once again you have to mash A to build up speed. Then you have to press and hold B when the blue tip of your pole is over a box on the ground, then release it when you're over the bar. It takes practice to get the timing right without being fat out, but it can also drag on too long if you're good. Canoeing. This one is interesting. You have to go through a series of gates, mashing A to move forward and B to go backwards. Some of the gates make you enter from the back or in reverse. Missing adds a 30-second penalty. But strangely, the qualifying targets are given in points instead of time. The physics are a little off too. If you run into a wall while going too fast, your momentum going in makes it tough to get away. Archery. Mash A to build up strength and press B to fire the arrow. You don't need to be at full power to hit the closer targets, and in fact I would advise against it too. The catch is that you also have to adjust your aim with the control pad taking wind into account. The directional arrows in the wind meter correspond to the mini-map at the top of the screen and not to the main view. Hurdles. The closest thing this game has to a straight-up race. Mash A to run and B to jump over the hurdles. Oddly, the hurdles all have a shallow pool of water behind them. Is this supposed to be a steeplechase? And the clock runs fast too. There is no way I finished this run in 2:23. But these are meaningless gripes. There is little to complain about this event. Horizontal bar. Way to end on a low note. This, the final event in Championship mode, combines nearly everything wrong with the game into one. It's button masher, the non-mashing controls are poor, and like the high dive, it's based on a grading system which seems to have no relation to what you just did. Building up power by mashing A changes the tricks you can do by pressing B, but loading your routine with high-powered movers won't necessarily earn you the best grades. You can help things along by sticking the landing, but really you'll be lucky to get at or above the qualifying mark. That's going to cost him some points. Now back to the studio. Thanks, Ichigo. The 3 modes available in this game are Training, Championship, and Versus. In Training mode, you can start on any of the 12 main events and keep going until you fail to meet the qualifying score or time. Championship mode is a joke, and I ain't laughing. It lets you pick a country to represent as you do all of the events in order. The problem is the qualifying targets here are higher than in Training mode. Just the second event, Triple Jump, could be a real wall of difficulty for some because of how quickly you need to keep mashing the buttons. The funny thing about Championship mode is if you fail an event, you don't get a game over immediately. See, the events are presented in 4 groups of 3 at a time. If you fail an event, you keep going until the end of that day, and then you get a game over. That's really stupid and artificial. If I wanted to try the later events after failing, I'd just go into Training mode, thank you very much. Oh, and guess what? After you clear the events once, you have to do them again, and the qualifying targets are higher. The payoff for slogging it through a day of events and winning a password are 2 exclusive sports you can't play anywhere else in the game, hang gliding and gunfiring, which you can use the zapper for. They're boring, but if nothing else, they're nice cooldown minigames, and you can play them as much as you want before moving on, or skip them entirely. There's also the multiplayer exclusive arm wrestling, which is a button mashing contest in its purest form. I will admit, these are some of the best graphics on the NES. Both the athletes and the backgrounds are well detailed, although I do wish their uniforms were color-coded by nation. The music is pretty good too, but the crowd cheering noise can get annoying given how long it is. Demanding button mashing aside, most of the events control well, but high dive, taekwondo, and horizontal bar might disagree with that statement unless you really know what you're doing. Track and Field 2 is the Ghosts and Goblins of sports games. It's unfairly tough, and that's just on the first run-through. Don't even think about buying this game if you don't have some sort of turbo controller. If you are equipped to take this game on, then don't worry about breaking out the turbo. It's not so much cheating as it is justice. This game does not deserve to be played fairly. But if you really want to do so, it would be a great excuse not to throw away your holy socks. Track and Field 2 just misses a medal with 60%, a C-. This is Kevin, with Ichigo, and you are the Resistance.